Welcome to Every Dollar Counts with Josh and Jay, a shot of truth serum for your investment and insurance questions. I'm Josh Knoll, the owner of Gulf Coast Financial Advisors, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Jay Stubbs, director of the Gulf Coast for Concourse Financial Group. We were brought to you on the Gulf Coast Financial Advisors Podcast Network. Well, listeners, as the Every Dollar Counts podcast is approaching our 2-year anniversary, and our 50th episode, which we could be able to tell you with certainty if we were better at counting.
Yeah, no doubt.
It's either 49 or 50, it's somewhere in that range. We're going to discuss the journey of Every Dollar Counts and the impact that podcasting has had on my practice, Gulf Coast Financial Advisors. We're also going to dive into how the podcast was part of an overall marketing overhaul of my practice, including a new website, social media presence, YouTube, professional logos, on and on and on and on. We're going to talk about that quickly. But before we dive into all this, let's have our friends from Sloth Racer kick us off. Quick housekeeping for compliance. Jay Stubbs and Concourse Financial Group are not affiliated with Prime Capital Investment Advisors, Qualified Plan Advisors, or Gulf Coast Financial Advisors. And Josh Knoll is not affiliated with Concourse Financial Group. Jay, buddy, how are you?
Yeah, all that compliance stuff, but we're still good buddies and thoroughly enjoy being in studio here with you today. And whether or not we're claiming this anniversary episode, whether it's I know it's 2 years.
It is 2 years.
And I know we're at recorded 50, 51, and whether or not this comes out as episode 50, who knows? But
who's counting?
Yeah, we definitely are and have enjoyed ourselves on this journey. It's been fun the last couple of years, and look forward to many years to come.
Well, and honestly, Jay, this is a good idea because we do talk a lot about serious topics. Now, we don't necessarily always take ourselves super serious, but the topics we talk about, life insurance, retirement planning, and all that, it can be a little dry, it can be a little serious. So for this one, we're going to have a little bit of fun because it's a question that I get asked a lot, and I'm sure you do too, is, hey, you got that podcast, what's the story with that? Why'd you do that? What kind of money are you making off it, and so on and so forth. So what I want to do, Jay, is I want to kind of take you back to the beginning when I was a very frustrated financial advisor trying to make a dent and make a presence in an area where I'm not from. I had no natural market. And I just felt like I was banging my head against the wall all over the place. And I felt like the guys, not even necessarily my competitors, but peers in related industries were just going light years faster than I was by using podcasting and social media. And so I finally took a decision that, I'm just going to go independent. I'm going to redo all this stuff, and I'm going to look at starting a podcast. Well, one of the first person I thought of doing a podcast, because you had already jumped in on several little marketing videos and things we had done, but you were obviously top of mind. So my first question to you is, when I asked you, I said, hey, Jay, would you be interested in doing a podcast with me? How long did it take you to decide?
About 2 seconds, as fast as I could get the words out, because I, too, was searching for ways to get my name, my brand, our company, and the services that we provide out to the marketplace. And I know for a fact that an investment advisor that might be independent or an insurance professional, they listen to you. And to hear what you're talking about. They have been doing so since we started this podcast. And maybe, just maybe, there's somebody that I don't get a chance to do business with, but maybe, just maybe, they would pick up the phone or shoot me a note or a call or a text and say, hey, really like what you and Josh have done with the podcast and really want to see if you can help me and my business. So it didn't take me long at all. I know 2 years ago when we saw this thing coming, podcasting was growing. It's still growing. There are more and more podcasts every day. And in fact, my wife walks around and all she does is listen to podcasts. All my kids do is listen to something on social media. Some of my experiences have been fantastic, and some have been really kind of, aren't you that guy that does that Every Dollar Counts podcast with? Yeah, that's me. So are we looking for the fame and the fortune? Not really. We're doing this to have a good time and be of service to you, to my prospective customer and your prospective customer.
Well, Jay, the origins were pretty basic. I felt like that there was this conversation happening online among potential clients and prospects, and I wasn't part of it. So I kept it very simple. I'm like, how do I consume stuff that I want to learn about or be entertained by or learn more about these certain aspects of things? How do I consume it? Well, I was a fairly early adopter to podcasts. Bill Simmons' podcast was one of the first ones that I tuned into many years ago. And really what I decided was I just wanted to be where people were looking, when they were looking, and how they were looking. And for me, I couldn't think of a better idea than jumping in on a podcast and trying to make that a go. Fortunately, you and I had some reps ahead of time where we had done some things via video, playing off each other. So we had some comfort level there. But still, I don't know if you and I exactly knew how this thing would morph and change over the last 2 years. For example, when I got into it, and I'm going to take a stab that most people that get into podcasting, particularly if they are advisors, their first thing that they're thinking is, I'm going to get into this for marketing. I'm going to get into this for the ROI. I'm going to say something just so brilliant, and people are just going to pick up the phone and call, and off I go. Well, I'm not going to tell you that doesn't happen. We'll talk a little bit about client acquisition as this goes along. But Jay, I'm going to kick it to you with this note. What I learned was the marketing was important. It actually has 100% helped us with our views as being considered experts in our field. But the networking, the centers of influence, the people in the area coming on our show, Cam Marston, Bradley Flowers, people like that, Johnny Gwynn, Marcus Netto. I mean, just the local networking and centers of influence that we've been able to bring on has been great. And honestly, one of the surprising things that is I have learned, holy cow, I feel like I tell people like my podcast hopefully is a learning tool for you because it's been an MBA for me.
Yeah, we got to study before we get on the mic.
Right.
You got to know what you're talking about. We might sound like we're rambling every now and then, but we do put out some facts. We do look these facts up because ultimately we know the show is dedicated to those folks that are serious about their overall financial planning. They work with you, Josh, to execute some of those strategies, and we do have to study. But yeah, it's the question you asked is, we knew it was a marketing play. Right. We knew it was a brand thing, but really and truly what you said is centers of influence and networking. Has it created conversation at a cocktail event? Yes. Yep. Has somebody asked me, hey, don't you do that podcast with Josh every dollar? Yes, we have. Does that lead to other questions? Absolutely. Yes. Does it lead to maybe a business meeting? It has. It has indeed. Have you, and the things that we have done, has your idea of this podcast and the diligence that we've had over the last couple of years of keeping it going, right, it's made other advisors that and I know start doing one as well.
100%. Yeah, which is very flattering. Because,
it is.
Because, to be fair, the idea for the podcast wasn't original with me. I mean, I took the other people that I listened to, I took other advisors' input and formed it into this. And then obviously I picked what I considered to be the best co-host ever in you. And between the two of us, I think we've created something that we could much greater than we could have done on our own. Definitely speaking for myself. And, Jay, on that, with you're saying that people come up and ask, honestly, if I'm in a group of local advisors, it's probably going to be the first thing that they'll mention.
Yeah. What does it take to do that? How did you get there? Where do you go record? What do you do? How do you edit it? Who is Sloth Racer and how'd you get them to be on your show? Things like that are kind of cool, but it doesn't take a lot. It takes some planning. You had to put it down on paper and create a strategy and execute that strategy as any good marketing effort should be. But you had to coincide it with your website, and you made a decision on getting a good website. You had to do that with a color scheme from your professionally crafted logo, and Gulf Coast Financial Advisors look and feel right is all part of it, so that when you do have a conversation with someone that is in a need to have a plan, the rapport is established. And quite honestly, that's just like somebody walking down the street saying, I recognize that brand, so I feel comfortable with them. After they've had the initial conversation with you, they're extremely comfortable because they already know who you are. They've heard your voice. Yep. They've seen you on social media. They've seen you talk. And the fact that we are very consistent with it for the last couple of years, and we have plans to keep it going. All of that comes into play, and it helps you grow your business.
Well, and also, if you want a good chuckle, listeners, go to my Facebook page or my YouTube channel and go back to my original kickoff video, which would have been July 2018, I guess. So I went independent before I actually got the podcast going. It took a little bit of time to get the podcast up and running, get through compliance, so on and so forth. But in the kickoff video, among the many things I said in a very nervous manner at the time was I wanted to have, Jay and I both felt like there's just a lot of misinformation out there about our industry. And we just wanted to make sure that we had our voices heard, and we wanted to establish ourselves from an authentic place as people that care about our clients and people that we serve, and also that we're people that are going to tell them the truth. We're going to let them know these are how these things work. There's nothing to hide. Here's what's inside the black box. And I just don't know if there's any other greater mechanism in at least 2021 for doing that other than a podcast, to be honest with you.
And the platforms, you had to make a decision what platforms to be on. We had, fortunately, Johnny Gwynn at Deep Fried Studios tell us where to go and how to do that. He executed that strategy for us. He sends an invoice, and we take care of that invoice. And as long as you take care of Johnny's invoices, you get to come back in the studio and record. But Johnny's always said something that in a couple of different settings that resonated with me is that what if somebody today in 2021, 2022 says, I don't need a website. You'd kind of say, really? Are you kidding? Good luck. But Johnny said back in early 90s, people were saying they were kind of poo-pooing the websites. I really do think that the podcast strategy is still in growth mode. I think he would attest that. But that people are on the front end of it, last couple of years, are going to be able to establish and sustain their marketing brand and do that in a lesser expensive world than traditional media and billboard and certainly magazine, which I don't even know the last time I opened a magazine.
Yeah, right. I mean, just think about the opportunities that's open for us as well. I mean, this takes practice. For those of y'all looking at doing a podcast, I highly, highly recommend getting some reps in first. The last thing you want to do is just jump on there, record a handful of episodes, kick them out there and expect anything to happen. Now, maybe you're the one in the million, maybe you're the next Joe Rogan, but for the rest of us, it just takes a lot of practice for Jay and I to get to this point where we're at, and then all the other opportunities that have come along with it. I've been asked to speak at events before. I've been at conferences. Again, it's top of mind a lot of times if I'm in a peer group or if I'm somebody that is tuned in digitally. In fact, I think, Jay, you and I have a potentially speaking engagement coming up, right?
We do. I think it's set. We're going to go to Birmingham. We're going to talk to a bunch of advisors and agencies up in Birmingham, and we're going to give them the story of how we got to where we are. We're going to do that in tandem with, I think, Bradley Flowers, so one of our major influencers. And if you don't know who Bradley Flowers is, do a quick search on him. He owns Portal Insurance Agency, which is a property and casualty firm down here in the Gulf Coast area, and he realized really quick when he got into that business that he could not compete with the big dollars that the large property and casualty companies can throw out there in media, and he needed to target his audience, and he needed to do that in a most cost-efficient manner. So he started working with the social media and different platforms, Facebook and Instagram. He also teamed up with a partner to do the podcast, and now the Insurance Guys podcast is one of the most well-recognized, if not the most recognized podcast in the property and casualty industry.
Yeah, they've done it big. And Bradley was one of the ones that, among many people that helped us on our journey, that taught us, hey, don't do this in a bubble. If you're going to record a podcast, man, you need to support it with social media. It needs to be on your website. It needs to be on your YouTube page. It needs to be on your Google My Business page. I mean, you need to have a lot of different things pointing back to this podcast. And it's amazing, Jay, sometimes we'll run a little experiment. About 2 weeks ago, we added our podcast to Facebook Player. And that particular day, that was on Johnny Gwynn's recommendation. That particular day, we got our most downloads per day ever. Right, just little tricks of the trade that you learn from this.
And we have thousands and thousands of downloads, right? We're legit thousands and thousands.
I mean, we've scratched and clawed to get to this point, right? We were talking about money and investments and insurance. We're not doing some of the stuff that Joe Rogan would do, but it's still interesting to our target audience. And that's really a thing, is knowing who is your audience. Yeah, we came into this like, hey, we want to put our voice out there to the people that are serious about their financial plan, but also somebody that is looking for personal touch, likes to hear a story, likes to hear our personalities coming through the microphone. And I think we've done a good job of crafting it around that type of environment.
And those that are listening, if you are thinking, well, golly, I think I could do that, or I need to do that, or I want to do that. Are you an independent contractor? Do you own your own business? Do you listen to our podcast thinking that your industry is not podcastable? I don't know if I've created a new word or not, but every single industry out there has a listening audience. If they spend money in that industry, or if they have a need to educate themselves, everything is podcastable. We listen to our good friend Cam Marston, What's Working with Cam Marston, and also does Keeping It Real. Cam's a buddy of mine for many years, and he has taken his couple of ideas and run with those. But Cam did a show with, I think, the proprietor of a plant business, very well recognized plant business. Since we don't want to disclose too much there, but they were talking about a specific type of azalea down here along the Gulf Coast and how it became famous. And my 16-year-old son was sitting in there, and before I turned the car off, he was like, wait, I want to hear the rest of this. Awesome. 16-year-old kid wanting to hear more about the Encore Azalea. So if you know what I'm talking about there, that's a great episode of Cam Marston's What's Working with Cam.
Well, you've crossed over a certain point when your kids are like, Dad, I don't want to hear your voice anymore when it's everywhere. And on that note, Jay, on podcast topics, Johnny was one of the people that really gave us good guidance in the beginning. He told us, don't go wide and shallow, go narrow and deep. And so that's really what we've done. We've tried to dive in again on those particular topics that are going to be important to the people listening to this podcast. So that I think that was great advice. I would give that advice to anybody looking at a podcast. Even if you've got a fairly esoteric topic, you probably still have a fairly narrow but potentially deep audience, and it's worth putting your voice out there if you've got the personality to do it. Jay and I are natural talkers, obviously, but I don't think you have to be quite as verbalicious as we are to
another new word,
right? To pull off a podcast.
Podcastable and Verbalicious.
You just got to care about what you're talking about, and you got to be consistent, and you got to be, I think, professional with the recording, the audio, and all that. So, well, Jay, anything else as we prepare for our big presentation? I guess I'll have to
I'm going to
iron my shirt first for a while.
Iron your shirt and tuck it in and shine your shoes.
Shine my boots.
It's good to be in person and giving those kinds of talks. I'm gonna ask you, Josh. I didn't ask you this question before we started this episode, but what do you think the future of Every Dollar Counts looks like? I know we've got one local news celebrity who has agreed to say, hey, I'd like to come on that podcast. I'm not going to mention any names in case that person falls through, but it seems as though our influence has moved over into other media outlets. Maybe we go out and grab some local media celebrities and ask them, hey, are you willing to talk about where you go research your finances, and who do you talk to make your decisions on your financial planning or your business planning and things like that? But what does the future of Every Dollar Counts look like to you?
Well, I think, Jay, one of the benefits of grinding this out to a certain degree, like being consistent, always coming in, having a good topic to talk about, and putting the work in and getting the episodes out there, is now we're considered legitimate. Not that we didn't, not that I'm still proud of our first handful of episodes. I think we did a fine job, but the point is, somebody can go into our catalog now. We have covered a lot of topics, and we've covered a lot of episodes, and I think that makes us pretty legitimate. So when we go to the guests that you're referring to, there was no hesitation. So when you say, what's the future of Every Dollar Counts, I think that we're going to take the next step up in exposure. That'll be coinciding with Johnny Gwynn and the Deep Fried Studios network that he's referring to, where you and I potentially are going to be on here once a week, even maybe once every 2 weeks, doing a live show that coincides with Every Dollar Counts. That also speaks to the quality and the depth of knowledge of our particular guests. And honestly, too, as you and I have seen this, when we've got a very successful business owner in the area that maybe, not always, but maybe would not be that keen on having a financial planning discussion right off the bat. Rarely, though, on the flip side of that, does that person ever say, no, I wouldn't, would you be on my podcast? Yeah, I'll do that. So we've been able to get some pretty successful people in here, and I think we just continue down that chain, better exposure, more coverage, more downloads, guests pretty well known, and just keep on these topics that people want to know about. And I just see the show continuing and going forward.
So if you're a listener and you're saying, I want to dip my toe in the podcasting world, or maybe I want to team up with Josh and Jay and help establish a brand or get my brand out there in digital media that I can then forward around to my potential customers and the prospecting efforts, that's something that they can do. All you got to do is reach out to me, reach out to Josh. We can have a conversation and potentially set that thing up. Just know that if you come into the studio, we're probably going to ask you one or two financial questions. You don't have to be fully disclosed on all of your details of your financial planning and all of your dollars and cents, but we want to know from others, how do you make some of the decisions that you make for your household or your business, and what drives you to make those decisions, or for lack of a better term, put things into action.
Very good. Well, Jay, I'm going to end it this way. If listeners, if you hear or write down anything that any of us has said during this podcast, write this down. Because really what this podcast at the end of the day is, I think it's got a good title. I think it's got a good logo. I think it's got good production. I think it's got good topics, good guests, all that. Jay and I are very proud of what we've done here. But really, the Every Dollar Podcast is a story of friendship, and it's a story of relationships. And it's a story of the friendship that Jay and I have developed on our time together. It's a story of him, picking up a brand new advisor in the Gulf Coast area that didn't know anybody and giving him a hand, and then him returning the favor of being a co-host in this journey. It's a story of the friendship and relationship we developed with our producer, Johnny Gwynn. And then really the relationships we've been able to develop with our guests, and particularly Will Stye, who went from just a podcast guest to actually someone that works with me under the Gulf Coast Financial Advisors brand has been a huge addition to my practice and just brings so much horsepower to the table, particularly with a CPA background. Not that Will and I may not have formed that relationship anyway, but the podcast just accelerated that, the excitement of it, the production, the productivity of it. So really, Every Dollar Counts is a story of friendship and relationships. And I'll end you with that. Jay, you can have a final word and we'll wrap it up.
Well, just look for a lot of exciting things to come. Been a good couple of years. We've pumped out 50 fairly decent episodes. We've got thousands of downloads, I know, when we go on the platform and we can look at those. But, Josh and I we're in our prime. We've got a lot of juice still in the tank, so to speak.
We're just getting started, buddy.
We're just getting started. So look for some exciting things and look for us to continue to have good financial insight, good risk management insight, offering some things for you to think about as you travel on your own financial journey.
Yep, very good. Love it. Well, many thanks to our producer, Johnny Gwynn. We mentioned him earlier here in Deep Fried Studios. Obviously, my co-host, Jay Stubbs. And then, as always, a huge shout out, and I mean this sincerely, to all of you that have joined us on this journey. Yes, we really appreciate when you mention the show, when we get to talk about it, because it's our baby. We created this thing from scratch, and it toddled along in the infancy stage. And I don't know exactly where we're at on the whole scheme of things. I know we've got a lot ahead of us, but it wouldn't have got to this point without you all and the feedback that you gave us, the positive feedback. And those who are just joining us now, check out our back catalog. You'll see what I'm talking about with this journey. Lastly, if you like the show music, go check out slothracerband.com. That's slothracerband.com. And they're going to take us home now. This has been Every Dollar Counts with Josh and Jay. Advisory services offered through Prime Capital Investment Advisors, LLC, PCIA, a federally registered investment advisor. PCIA, doing business as Prime Capital Wealth Management, PCWM, and Qualified Plan Advisors, QPA. Gulf Coast Financial Advisors is independent of Prime Capital Advisors. Information presented for educational purposes only, is not an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any securities. All investments involve risk, and unless otherwise stated, be sure to consult a tax professional before implementing any tax or investment strategies.